speaker in line comes with 17 plus years of rich industry experience and currently dons the hat of VP Customer Success at Propelo. Prior to Propelo, she has worked with Palo Alto Networks, Riverbed Technology, and Cisco Systems. She is responsible for managing and heading front-end development, automation, and customer enabled for a world-class product at Propelo. With that, I now hand over the frame to Ms. Meghana Dwarakanath. Over to you, Meghna.
Hey everybody, I'm Meghana Dwarakanath, VP of Customer Success at Propelo. And today we want to talk about how you can do a data-led approach to engineering and what's a good starting point and how you can leverage data and insights to help your teams perform better, to recognize bottlenecks and to train your teammates for a better data-driven culture. Now, when we want to look at data driven engineering, what we want to do is look at the typical use cases on, hey, where all can you leverage these engineering insights? What are those pillars, if you will? We'll talk through a case study where we use the data driven insights in one of our customer environments to get improved efficiencies and to drive increased throughput. We'll also talk through if you want to start a data driven journey, how you can go about in your organization, and then close it out with a summary. So, with that, when we talk about data driven engineering, right, as an engineering manager, as an engineering leader, I'm sure there are a few questions that you get asked, right? Hey, there's a new feature coming. How quickly can your team deliver on that feature? Why are we slow? Can we do this faster? Where are our bottlenecks, right? Quality issues, of course, any engineering leader worth their salt will know that that is a big pain point. Reducing any bugs, especially in production, is a high priority. Talking through efficiencies and even questions at a much higher executive level, right? Are we focused on the right insights? Are we focused on the right priorities? What are the teams working on? Now, if you look at all of these questions, they sound simple enough, but to answer them from the context of engineering teams is no small task, right? Things like how quickly can the team deliver on a new project would alone need you to take data from multiple sources in your SDLC toolchain and walk through it, collate all the data, get your insights, and then maybe you're scratching the surface. So, with these questions in mind, let's look at how data led engineering can help provide some of those answers. So, now when we talk about the process of data led engineering, what we at Propello recommend is a three-step process, right? Uh, to kick off the journey. The step one is to know where you are today. So that's what I would call the benchmarking phase. You kick off your measurements, you know where you are today, and then based on that, you get a sense of your baseline, right? And your current status. And this gives a place that you can drive from. The next step, of course, is to put in processes in place based on that benchmark that drive continuous improvement, which means that if your benchmark says your focus areas are 1 to 3, these are your bottleneck. Now you're putting in some processes in place, either manually or in an automated fashion, that are helping you get over those bottlenecks. And then once that is done and once those changes have been made, you reiterate through the whole process, which means now you get insights on whether the changes you've made in your organization are effective, they're yielding the results you want, uh, what other bottlenecks are they surfacing. And now, if you'll see, this becomes a cycle, which is, say, every quarterly or every 6 months, you go through this cycle of benchmarking, driving the improvements, and then surfacing the bottlenecks. With that, Propello offers solutions across pretty much all pillars of engineering data insights. And what do I mean by that? So, whether it be developer productivity, whether it be agile transformation, where teams are trying to move into an agile methodology, for example, or even if it is your standardized reporting to your financial organizations, we have use cases across multiple customers that drive these use cases for them. But for today, we are going to focus on the number three on your screen, which is agile transformation. How did Propello help a customer bring in agile methodologies into their teams, drive effective measurement, and in the end, give a increased throughput for the teams? So with that, let's get into the case study. How did our customer improve their sprint output by 33%? So when we talked to the customer about where they were and what they were trying to do, the customer had engineering organization working in the waterfall model. And the goal was to move to a more agile delivery, which means that instead of having a release once every 6 months, they wanted to move towards bi-weekly releases, release more frequently, and also develop more frequently. They also had a transformative journey when they were moving from on-prem to SaaS, and that itself brings with it a whole bunch of complexities, right? The kind of development, the kind of considerations that you need to host a SaaS product versus an on-prem in terms of availability, in terms of monitoring, in terms of CI/CD, all of those considerations as well. And to add to that, there was the complexity, which is now a reality for every engineering organization that you can think of. It had distributed teams that needed to coordinate and function to drive through all of these changes. So, now when you talk about this transformative journey, what were some of the initial issues that we uncovered, and what did that look like? Of course, when you start a transformative journey, especially something like an agile transformation, every team adopts its own version of agile, right? So there was no standardized process that set expectations across the team that said, hey, this is what you need to do, this is how we are going to drive it, and ultimately, these are even the KPIs we're going to look at in terms of throughput and delivery. Then, of course, comes the whole estimation, which is something that's not as present in the waterfall model. Is they definitely knew teams were having difficulty estimating their uh, stories and tickets, but they really did not have a sense of which team was awesome with estimation or which team needed more help, right? To top that, a reality with all engineering organizations, their data was spread across multiple tools, which means that if you had to track releases, that was happening in one system, tracking the tickets, of course, in a second system, code in a third system, and you needed something that was going to drive insights across all of these systems to figure out where the bottlenecks are. And then, of course, the lack of visibility when you're transforming to agile, when you're experimenting on different things, you want to know if a tweak in the process is giving you the desired output. And the lack of visibility, the lack of data and insights kind of was a blind spot where they did not know that the changes they made actually worked or not until it was too late. So we needed a better model where there were a lot of key indicators on whether things were going in the right direction or not. With that, let's double click on some of the challenges that they faced, right? Now, when you talk about lack of standardized processes, especially from an agile standpoint, right? What does that mean? It means, hey, we did not have any standards in the way teams were estimating. We did not have a standardized way of prioritizing, which means that there was a lot of scope creep happening in your agile sprint planning. In terms of requirements or story points, All of these things kind of added risk to the execution, right? Without all of this data available, it would not be reasonable to expect teams to complete their sprints consistently, sprint over sprint. We've talked about the multiple tools already where, you know, uh, program managers wanted to, of course, get a sense of velocity, but development managers wanted to get a sense of, hey, how many CI/CD jobs of mine failed this sprint? Or how much code did I write? How much code churn did I have this sprint? So that data was not available. And then, of course, the lack of end to end visibility, which means that teams did not know why they were doing the process changes they were doing or what impact it was having, right? Um, so, with that, how did Propello come in and help in this picture, right? We took the challenges and turned them into insights. Now, what did this mean? It meant first, if there was a lack of consistency among the teams, we wanted to come in and not only ensure that there is consistency, but also be able to measure and put teams into different maturity tracks. And we'll talk about what that means in a bit. But ultimately, we wanted to, as a benchmark, know where the teams were today in terms of following the processes. How hygienic were they with the agile methodology, right? The second part, of course, was how do we improve that development velocity? The first step towards improving velocity or throughput for any team is to recognize where the bottlenecks are. What stages are they taking the most time in? Where are they generating those bugs? And then, of course, taking all of this data and making it accessible in a centralized place so that teams are able to go and access it and conduct their retrospectives and clearly see and understand the implications of the process choices they have made. With that, what Propello did, and this is where I'm talking about the consistency and being able to score teams into different agile maturity levels, is that we were able to work with the customer and get a very basic set of criteria that they wanted to push forward as an agile practice. And what does this mean? Some of the very basic criteria were, hey, we need to have acceptance criteria. We need to have consistent story pointing for every ticket that's being worked on. And if any of these criteria are missing, we need to alert or notify our program folks. Now, if you see the image below, these set of rules or criteria, if you will, were applied to every team's active sprint and backlog, and it generated a hygiene score. So there were teams that scored great in these areas, which means, they were pretty hygienic when it came to having requirements on their stories, etc. And then there were teams that did not do so well. So now the program team had a focus area on which were the teams they needed to coach better. And it was all done with a data driven approach, right? It was not which team am I more close to or which team do I talk more to and I'm going to go continue to engage with that team. But a data driven approach to, hey, these teams are on the lower end of the maturity track. We are going to, as a PM organization, spend more time with them. These teams are doing okay. There'll be some normal level of engagement. And these teams are doing great. So there's not much work there to be done. And we're going to let them execute the way they are running today. Of course, continuing to this, uh, talking about some of the other execution level hygiene that we were talking, like, hey, is everything story pointed? Is everything assigned? And not only providing these hygiene scores, what Propello was able to do is generate automatic nudges because it is a habit that needs to be built as you're going through the transformation. And you don't want to be the person that's going and physically nudging every developer to do something. Build in those automatic nudges for all the hygiene rules that you have set, which means that the minute a developer picked up a story that was not story pointed, they would get a nudge saying, hey, You need to be able to estimate this before you pick this up. And that was the aspect of hygiene and planning that was helped through this process. Now, when we talk about velocity, right, uh, a lot of people are able to say, yes, we take about 17 days to close a story. And that is great. But then when you go back to the engineering leader and say, I want to shave down the lead time for this, right, delivery by 20%, then that's what becomes a more interesting question because now you need to understand where that time is being spent. Why is it taking 17 days? And what Propello provides and what we were able to do with our customers is give them that end to end lead time, right from the ticket being worked on, picked up for working on, all the way through the time taken for the relating coding activity, which is probably happening in a different system, uh, to security scans, to CI/CD processes, which teams may be running in Jenkins or Bamboo or any of the variety of CI/CD tools that are available, all the way to it going into production. So as we talk through this lead time, we've already touched three or four SDLC tools, and now you as a manager or a leader are able to get this comprehensive insight across all of this. So with this insight, we were able to get the bottlenecks both at the process level, which is, hey, we're spending way too much time for stories in backlog. Are we prioritizing them the right way, for example? To engineering managers being able to look at the coding activity and saying, oh, I have a problem with my merge time, right? My developers are finishing coding on time, but they're not able to merge in time. Is there a better process I can put in place as a manager that will help smoothen this bottleneck? All the way to, we deploy within 5 hours of code being merged. So that is pretty awesome. Our CI/CD system is doing a great job. Or for some teams, that was the bubble, right? They did not have a CI/CD, automated CI/CD in place, and that clearly reflected in their lead time. So being able to give the breakdown both at the program level bottlenecks and at the engineering execution level drove a lot of insights into where those bottlenecks were and what needed to be done. Again, uh, going through what our customer was going through, what were some of the data points that we found, right? We found that as the customer was running 2 week sprints, pretty much a huge amount of time was spent in the review part, which is they took 5 days on an average to review code and even longer to be able to merge that code, which means that you would build out of it or start testing out of it. So again, first process in any improvement is identifying that there's a bottleneck. So what we were able to do is send nudges to the reviewers saying, hey, the team has set a SLA of 2 days for reviews and looks like you're going over that threshold. Can you please start reviewing this? Uh, and also kind of walk through the team on how to effectively review, which is how they can maintain different PR sizes. Smaller PRs means faster reviews, better attention to the review, for example, and be able to put those processes in place. And then, of course, once the pull requests are reviewed, being able to get them to merge faster, right? Again, step one was identification. And this was, of course, causing a bottleneck for QA where things were not getting merged and things were not available for them to test. Evaluating if there's effective CI/CD in place. Why is it taking so much time to merge? And once again, being able to set those alerts and nudges to say, hey, this needs to move through the pipeline. You're breaching your SLO on this particular stage. With that, of course, we talked about this. The lead time itself provided insights into bottlenecks in various parts of the tool chain, but also additionally getting a sense, even from a security perspective, of okay, sprint over sprint, how many new vulnerabilities were introduced. Uh, we were able to integrate with SonarCube and provide those insights so developers could act on it immediately. Uh, then looking at from a sprint to sprint perspective, how many test cases were added so that you still have a sight of the quality aspect as things are moving through the pipeline. And then, of course, being able to integrate with launch darkly because uh, as things moved into SaaS, you must all be very familiar with the concept of feature flagging. Just because it is in production doesn't mean it's live. So being able to get insights around how long it's taking for go live, when is it going live, and when does the team have to come in and do that additional work to make sure it's safe in production. Now, with all of this, if you ask the teams and program folks to go look at those 5, 6 SDLC tools, this would not be a very effective way of driving that complete picture. What we were able to do is bring insights across all of this tool chain onto a single dashboard. And sometimes not even into a single dashboard, but also a single insight. For example, how much time is it taking, and break that out across different tool chains. And with this, uh, we were able to kind of remove the burden of being able to access this information. They were able to access it immediately. They were able to consume this information readily and make those necessary changes. Experiment as the organization is going through this process and get to a better throughput. These insights also help build that culture of kudos, right? If there are teams that were doing fabulously well, that showed a lot of improvement. Hey, your hygiene score was 15 on 100 last sprint. This sprint, you've gotten to 50 over 100. That's awesome. That means that the team is doing better in adopting those agile practices. So it also helped drive that culture of kudos, being able to recognize teams that did show that improvement, that did show that adoption, and drive from there. What were the results? Right? We saw an immediate increase in the commit to done, which means that whatever the teams were committing to, they started completing 33% more of whatever they were committing to. Then, sprint over sprint, the productivity increased by up to 5%. And when you're talking of an organization with hundreds of engineers, you know how much that 5% means, right? That means of in a team of 100 people, that's 5 engineers worth of work. And then, of course, we were also able to drive that visibility into the post development, which is the production deployment processes so that the teams could be suitably involved. Now, with this baseline set, with the hygiene criteria set, and getting the teams onboarded onto that idea, we were able to say, hey, what are the next steps we want to tackle? And these were a little more complex problems that depended on that basic hygiene to be up and running for those teams, which is how do I do better capacity planning? How do I make my teams more predictable? How can I build a better backlog hygiene and make sure we have enough backlog, groomed backlog available? What are the requirements around that? How do I define a groomed backlog? So once the basic tenets of agile transformation were set and teams were uh, working on those cultural and habitual changes, the program team was now able to move on to more complex data driven insights around these areas. Uh, to wrap up as a summary, I do want to go back to if you want to start on a data driven journey, what are those 3 pillars that we want to look at in terms of data driven insights? What we talked through the case study today was around the planning sector, right? Agile is all about planning and being able to execute on that plan. We also have insights around alignment that you want to start considering, which is where is my team delivering value? Is it aligned with the business roadmap? And are we having resource allocation in the way that we want and we intended? And then on the complete pure engineering execution part of it, which is, hey, what is our lead time? What is our MTTR? What's our deployment frequency? And how can we affect and change those numbers? What's our failure rate? And with that, what would be the recommended rollout plan that we suggest? Uh, Many teams, again, based on their maturity model, have different journeys. But for a team that is just starting out, we do recommend that we start with the DORA Insights, which is your execution pillar, stands for DevOps Research and Assessment, and tracks across four key metrics, right? What's my lead time? What's my MTTR? What's my failure rate? And what's my deployment frequency? And we recommend this because this is independent of any of the underlying processes that you have, whether it be waterfall, uh, Scrum, Kanban, Scrumban. Then, of course, be able to recognize the bottlenecks, automate that culture of habit forming uh, based on how we want to rectify that bottleneck, and then expand into other metrics and expand across all the phases as we move through this journey. And with that, that was a brief insight into how you can leverage metrics, insights, automation, to affect the planning pillar, and how can you build a generic plan to lead your team through that data-driven journey and roll out a data-driven culture. Thank you so much.